Welcome to the new JFK show, number 239. We had a meltdown at 153 News. The server was stolen and taken away, and our domain name was stolen. So we've been kind of out for a little while. So we've been holding back on the shows until we got the domain name back up and our regular audience. So, all right, tonight we've got a great show. If you ever really wondered what President Kennedy has done for you, well, after you see what Cuba would have looked like if they would have okayed the invasion, and you know there was only one person that stopped that invasion, and we're going to take a look at it tonight. And Larry's got a great, if you want to follow along, you can go to his blog, and it's all about what the Cuban invasion would have looked like. Go ahead, Larry, and welcome to the show, Dr. Fetzer.
Great to be here with you guys. Go for it, Larry.
Dr. Fetzer, where were you in October of 1962, the month of the October missile crisis, or August to October 1962?
I've been commissioned as second lieutenant in the Marine Corps in June. I think I was actually at Quantico undergoing infantry officer training.
Mm-hmm. But you weren't on a battleship or anything like that, were you?
Not at that point in time, no.
But you were in 1963 when the assassination.
Well, I was in the USS, the LPHE was JEMA, landing platform helicopter, you know. It's got a shallow keel because helicopters take off vertically and land, so they don't need the long, stable platform anchored out in Kaohsiung Harbor, Formosa. When the officer of the deck awakened me at 3:30 to tell me JFK had been shot, then awakened me again at 4:30 to tell me they'd caught the guy who done it. It was a communist. I thought that was very fast work, Larry. And of course, today we know why, how they were able to solve the crime of the century so rapidly.
Super sleuths.
I know.
Super spooks.
Minutes. Super spooks. You're right about that.
Well, and I've written a piece on this because I was asked by St. Patrick to do something on the new documents, and the one that I came across, I actually found this months ago, and I just set it aside. And going back and looking through my records, you know, through the files, I was just overwhelmed, you know, when I saw this, because it, you know, that so many files have and documents have been redacted. Well, this one in particular was redacted, but the ink and the
You got to thank an idiot now and then. Every now and then, an idiot comes through for you and doesn't use good ink.
Yeah. And this one, you know, just blew me away completely, because it's a complete plan on the invasion of Cuba, and how Operation Mongoose, who was handling, you know, the covert operations, you know, trying to get rid of Fidel Castro, where even Bobby Kennedy was involved, I might add. And Operation Mongoose was asked by the Joint Chiefs of Staff, to come up with a plan. And the Joint Chiefs, you know, very readily and so heartily said, hey, here it is, you know.
Let's bomb the place into the Stone Age. What do you think?
Well, it's not as much that as it is the utilization and the plans on the utilization of U.S. American troops and resources, to the point where it's comparable to actually D-Day, you know. And I shared this with a couple of people, and it was just overwhelming. Completely, they were just completely overwhelmed, you know, with the amount and the hardware that involved here, you know. So
you're telling me there was a plan for the massive invasion of Cuba?
Absolutely.
Just wait and see, Dr. Fetzer. And not only that, we get to see the type of crap that they redact, because you can see right through the ink.
Yeah, I found this document, and I don't know if anybody who's actually spoken about this. It's we have it featured on ST's Garrison. By the way, I'll take a minute here to announce that St. Patrick has a new journal magazine, and the name of the magazine is Garrison. Okay, and what he does is he brings, you know, authors, you know, together, you know, to present papers, you know, and articles relating to the JFK assassination, and Jim Garrison, and just a lot of things. Also, there's articles on RFK and MLK, and just basically the assassinations of the '60s, and this one in particular has been selected not as a feature of the magazine, but it's included in the next edition of the magazine, and it's a memorandum. And the special group Augmented was the elite of the Joint Chiefs. Okay, now the Joint Chiefs at that time, I'm sure a few of us can mention some of those. Like Curtis LeMay, Lemnitzer, what was the name? A couple of others that I hadn't, I was thinking about, but anyway, they, this Operation Mongoose, which we all know about, there was chief of operations for Operation Mongoose, and the Joint Chiefs requested from, Operation Mongoose requested from the Joint Chiefs, which was a special augmented group here, a plan. And if you look at the document itself, it gives us exact quantities, numbers here, including troops, Army, Marines, Navy, battleships,
artillery units,
aircraft carriers. What I've done here, everything that's been redacted, I have reproduced in red here. You see this?
Nice.
And but and then at the end I'll show you the entire document. But in fact, we can go ahead and scroll.
Sorry, you're doing such a wonderful job with this stuff. I can't believe it. It's just sensational.
This is something that this is the first time, and this one definitely flew under the radar, Jim, because and it's just mind blowing. And if you look at the date, August the 2nd, 1962, we're talking about just a couple of short months before the October missile crisis. Okay, so when they're coming up with this plan, so very specific plan to invade Cuba and to make it a quick strike so that the rest of the world cannot react. Obviously, the only country who would have reacted, to something like this would have been the Soviet Union. But with the U.S., being the dominant force that it is, obviously, obviously the Allies wouldn't have even, come close to even, touching this or getting involved in this, or putting up, any type of resistance or even, going against the U.S.'s wishes here. The only country that would have, the Soviet Union, maybe China,
I don't think in that era China would have involved itself. I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't either. But since we know that by that time Fidel Castro had already cozied up to Khrushchev, and they were already bringing in missiles, into Cuba.
Actually, tactical nuclear.
Oh, absolutely, ICBMs and everything. Yeah.
That's where the U.S. was miscalculating. If we'd invaded, it would have been a nuclear war.
Yeah, and that's what this document is all about, Jim. It's just, it's just, it's just mind blowing because, in the callous way that they just, nonchalantly,
Do you think JFK was ever briefed on this?
No way.
That's a good point of discussion here.
Well, if he would have been, then you can certainly see why he said, "We're not doing this, guys." Well,
that's why at the end of the article, I make a brief comment about that, and so if we can go ahead, this is the entire document, and it says top secret, special handling, nobody, this is eyes only, and, counteraction, taking into account, what, for example, here, Cuba had about 50 MiG fighters, and what the assessment would have been, the gain and loss, that would have been involved in this, and how to make it
Yeah, the casualty weigh and measure how many we're going to give them.
Right, and make it as fast an operation as possible to minimize the casualties, you know, like that. So, and you know, it's just mind blowing, you know, because the detail here is just unbelievable. And as you can see, we were not supposed to see any of this.
Yeah.
Okay. I know you guys can see how you can see right through the mark here.
Yeah, boy.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah. So
it's great.
Yeah. It's
might as well not have been redacted at all.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you know, they can't cover, you know, dot all the I's and cross all the T's, you know, somewhere along the line, you know, some of this stuff, you know, it's just too much baggage, you know? And that's why, you know, a lot of people say, oh, there's nothing in those documents, you know, they're all redacted, you know, and they say, yeah, well, you know, you got to get in there and look, you know, and make up your own mind, you know, and you can find these nuggets, you know, they are there, you know.
I love this where it says the possibility of a requirement for a sustained occupation of Cuba. My God.
Go ahead and read it for us, Dr. Fetzer.
Oh, yeah.
Memorandum for the Special Group Augmented, Consequences of U.S. Military Intervention in Cuba. That is the title of another document which flew under the radar and was released by the National Archives with a number. It shows the cold-blooded side of the Joint Chiefs as they responded to the Chief of Operations for Mongoose request, laying out the logistics needed for a full-blown invasion of Cuba and neutralization of Fidel Castro. The ultimate destination was a special group augmented. The entire playbook for the invasion is presented in excruciating detail. The first paragraph of the paper reads, consequences of U.S. military intervention in Cuba to include cost, personnel, units, and equipment, effect on worldwide ability to react, possibility of a requirement for a sustained occupation at the level of national mobilization required in Cuba and counteraction. Words of this magnitude have probably not been expressed since World War II. In fact, within the document, there's even a mention of D-Day. Yeah, this is going to be C-Day. The juiciest National Archives Assassination Record Review Board documents were redacted and blacked or whited out when sensitive information had to be withheld. This particular document does have redactions, but they were done with a marker that allowed the information to be seen through the redaction. Take a look. Requirements, personnel units. In order to seize control of key strategic areas in Cuba within 10 to 15 days with the minimum casualties of both sides, 261,000 U.S. military personnel would participate in the operation. About 71,000 Army, 35,000 Marines will be engaged on the ground within Cuba. In addition, approximately 29,000 Army troops will be available on-call forces.
Wow. You're not. Wow. I have it down here in red, Jim, and I see that you don't even have to go and read the.
I don't even have to read the red. Wow. Marines, artillery units, and armor, including about 85 tanks, plus some 320 supporting aircraft. Navy, approximately 175 to 200 ships. This is huge, including two aircraft carriers with approximately 180 aircraft embarked. Air Force, about 490 troop carriers and transports, 312 tactical fighters, and 65 reconnaissance and refueling aircraft. Wow.
I mean, did they have all this during D-Day? They may not even had this much for D-Day.
No, and I'm going to show you a comparison of the actual D-Day.
Good, Larry.
But what's really, you know, wild about this here is that, you know, this is for real. This is a real plan.
You're talking about refueling in the middle of air, reconnaissance, refueling.
And what this is all about is that, you know, there ain't gonna be no Bay of Pigs again, you know?
No. Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
You know, forget that. We are not gonna take our chances on the Bay of Pigs.
Massive, with overwhelming force.
Yeah, Air Force. Okay, now here, Air Force.
Air Force, in order to land the maximum number of airborne troops in minimum time, 14 Air Force Reserve Troop Carrier Squadrons C-119 were originally included in the airlift plan. However, Singh Clant and U.S. Air Force have requested to prepare alternative plans not involving any mobilization prior to D-Day. Effect on worldwide ability to react. The present basic contingency plan anticipates achieving control of key strategic areas in Cuba within 10 to 15 days. Subsequent to gaining such control, there will be progressive withdrawal of forces as the situation permits, as though the Cubans were going to take this line down. You know, the Cubans are fierce fighters, Larry. You know, the U.S. wouldn't get away with this. When the assault forces have been committed to the Cuban operation as strategic army forces in CONUS.
That's continental U.S.
Yeah, would be about supporting forces for the remaining 5 divisions. It's estimated the Army Airborne 2 divisions would be available for other operations 15 to 30 days after withdrawal from Cuba. Substantial Army forces.
Yeah, that's further down in the document because I've just got exit.
Yeah, I figured, yeah.
Yeah, but here, the Atlantic.
Allied fleet amphibious troop lift capability, less that deployed within the 6th Fleet will be engaged fully during the initial phase of the operation. There will be requirement for amphibious, maybe requirement for amphibious lift to rapid redeployment and counter guerrilla activity until order has been restored. Yeah, right, ever. Order would never be restored because the Cubans would have guerrilla warfare going on permanently.
Well, not only that, the Soviets would have never, you know, taken this line down.
Right, I agree. It's anticipated most of these ships will be available for other commitments within approximately 30 to 45 days. About 40 to 50% of the Pacific amphibious troop lift capability will be employed in the landings in the eastern end of Cuba. These ships will be available for other operations in the Pacific about 15 days after withdrawal of the Pacific Marines from Cuba.
Well, they're bringing in from the Pacific theater, you know, it's got nothing to do with the Atlantic, you know, but they are mobilizing what they want. Worldwide. This is a worldwide mobilization.
Yeah, it is. In addition to the amphibious troop lift capability, the initial requirement for sea lift will include MSTS ships obtained through the Maritime Administration. Overall requirements for shipping will diminish after the initial 10 to 20 days of the operation. It's estimated combat-ready status of the Atlantic Command Marine Division wing team will be restored within 15 days of withdrawal. Combat readiness of the Pacific Command Marine Expeditionary Brigade within 30 days of withdrawal. For approximately 10 days, CONUS MATS airlift would be fully committed.
This is
huge operation.
Yeah, you know, it's huge something. Operation. Yeah, so here's the entire memorandum, you know, and here August, this is from August the 2nd, 1962. Again, you have to consider the date and the timing of this, and then in historical context, look at what happens later on in October, you know, the missiles of October. And so this is where, you know, you have to take into consideration what happened, you know.
This is 15 months before Jack's taken out in Dallas. 15 months?
Yeah, August the 2nd, yeah. Yeah, but don't forget, missiles of October is when, you know, the standoff, you know, the nuclear standoff happens when, and I'm thinking here, August the 2nd of August, August 62, this is when you've got all these U-2 flights over Cuba, and they're starting to detect, you know, all of this hardware, you know, that the Soviets are installing in Cuba, okay, which are ICBMs and, you know, nuclear capabilities. You know, and obviously, you know, this is something to consider when we, you know, consider that this never happened. Okay, so why did it not happen? Then, you know, as far as, you know, my assessment is concerned, I think that once, you know, the intelligence apparatus kicked in and the Soviets and the Americans, especially the Americans, you know, like I said, with the U-2 overflights, and they began to see that, wait a minute, you know, this is crazy. You know, this is not, then again, it's like you mentioned, this could have been also something that JFK put a complete halt to, which would have also guaranteed and sealed his fate in a way that, wait a minute, you know, the Joint Chiefs, you know, thought he was, you know, he was a pussy, you know, and that he didn't want to go to war and that kind of thing. And the only way to get this done would have been, you know, to take him out. So that's why, you know, this document is so incredibly revealing and important, you know.
And with all this planning and all this forethought, they did not know that there were nukes in Cuba and they were going to use them.
Right.
Well, they found out within, you know, a few weeks of this, obviously, you know, and that's probably why, you know, with the Joint Chiefs, you know, already, you know, hot to trot on this, you know, and then to be told that they had to stand down, you know, what do you guys think of this?
Yeah.
This would have been brutal, Larry. You would have lost tens of thousands of U.S. troops doing this, tens of thousands.
They're thinking that this could be a lightning strike, Jim, you know, and that this could be, you know, in and out.
Not a chance. Not a chance.
Like they did with
Castro had good intel. He knew what the hell was going on.
No, not only that,
The Soviets, remember, the Soviets had learned the date of the invasion for the Bay of Pigs. Fidel already knew exactly when we were coming, and the CIA knew they knew. The only one who didn't know was JFK, the one person who was left ignorant of the fact that Castro knew exactly the date we were coming was the commander-in-chief.
Mm-hmm. This is an interesting one right here, point number 3, level of national mobilization.
Level of national mobilization required. Army, none. In lieu of mobilizing civil affairs units from the active reserve tactical forces, though not trained for this mission, will be employed to conduct civil affairs military government operations.
Sort of like what
running
like MacArthur did, right, in Japan,
Maybe for troop and cargo sea lift, no rise in mobilization level would be required beyond the present authority held by the Maritime Administration and Charter Shipping Air Force. In order to land the maximum number of airborne troops in the minimum time, 14 Air Force Reserve Troop Carrier Squadrons, C-119, were originally included in the airlift. However, C-Clant and U.S. Air Force have requested to prepare alternative plans not involving any mobilization prior to D-Day.
Do you see this D-Day? This is what I wanted you to see. D-Day. I mean, this is such an audacious plan, you know, that they're even comparing it, you know.
Well, I think it's just an acronym meaning for the date of the invasion.
Yeah, of course. But, you know, it's exactly, you know, the same as, you know, as the Normandy invasion, you know, so.
Yeah, Larry, let me get the screen share. I'm gonna play something for you real quick.
Sure.
All right. Well, let me make sure I got the volume good. No.
Good evening, my fellow citizens. This government, as promised, has maintained the closest surveillance of the Soviet military buildup on the island of Cuba. Within the past week, unmistakable evidence has established the fact that a series of offensive missile sites is now in preparation on that imprisoned island. The purpose of these bases can be none other than to provide a nuclear strike capability against the Western Hemisphere. That, and I quote him, training by Soviet specialists of Cuban nationals in handling defensive armaments was by no means offensive. And that if it were otherwise, Mr. D'Amico went on, the Soviet government would never become involved in rendering such assistance, unquote. That statement also. Our goal is not the victory of might, but the vindication of right.
Yeah.
That was heavy duty.
Yeah, actually, that wasn't the one. I wanted it.
Yeah, but it's still one of the most serious moments in American history, Eric.
Well, yeah, and there, I don't know if you guys ever saw about 10 years ago, Tom Clancy, the author, he hosted a program on the October missile crisis, and where they actually interviewed captains of submarines, nuclear subs that were Soviet nuclear subs that were with their finger on the button, ready to, launch, and some of these interviews are just, mind blowing, Jim, and to give you an idea of how close, this whole situation was to boiling over and causing, a thermonuclear event, between the superpowers, where, the entire Eastern Seaboard would have been completely obliterated, and Cuba and the Caribbean, and, notwithstanding, obviously, that the U.S. had, all of their forces in Europe and everything also, ready to pounce on the Soviet Union, and now that we know that the U.S. had probably 100 to 1 more nuclear capability than the Soviet Union at the time anyway, so, just what this document does, as far as I'm concerned, is to, tie up a lot of loose ends as far as, what these Joint Chiefs were ready to do.
Yeah, they wanted the first preemptive nuclear strike against Russia.
Exactly. That's exactly what this is all about.
We won't lose as many people as they are. And then John Kennedy says they wanted to go in the bunker and launch this attack. And he says, you people are going to stay outside the bunker and, before anything happens, So he was telling them off right away. But I also believe that up until this point, he hadn't been completely born again. I really believe the Cuban Missile Crisis is when he was born again, and he wasn't as much of a globalist. And he realized what was about to happen, that the Joint Chiefs of Staff had a collective death wish for the world. And it was teetering on him and Khrushchev. And he actually talked to Khrushchev, and he said, I want you to go by the ocean, and I'm going to go by the ocean, and I want y'all to look out. And I want you to think about what we're about to do. And both of them looked out in the beauty that they saw and said, we just can't do it.
Well, a lot of people think that, the Russians were the ones that blinked, and there's nothing further from the truth, because there was actually a deal in place, and I'm sure Jim knows about this, where, the U.S. had to also withdraw all these nuclear warheads out of Turkey, which were, right at the border, within, you could even see it, the Turkey across from the Soviet Union there. And so it wasn't, something that, Khrushchev said, okay, let's pack it in. There was a deal in place.
Yeah, they both made concessions, and they made a deal for peace. And Bombs away LeMay and the Joint Chiefs had no intention of peace. It wasn't even comprehensible to do it that way.
Now, what I've always wondered, and I'm sure Jim can jump in here on this, is why, after JFK had been taken out, why didn't LBJ go ahead with this?
Well, I think he knew it risked world war. He wanted to manipulate the military into assisting him in becoming president, but he really didn't want the world to go up in a nuclear conflagration. I think he was a very savvy guy in terms of, not only manipulating political figures within the United States, but he had a sense of geopolitics. I do believe he gave the military Vietnam as a payoff.
That's what I was going to say. He knew which fight to pick.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That's what Phil Nelson says, is that if you're going to be great and you're going to be remembered as a hero, you have to have your own war.
As a war president is what Phil.
Right. But he didn't want to have it 90 miles away from Florida. Yeah. How about the other side of the planet? That's a little easier.
Or Texas, or very close to Texas for that matter.
A lot closer than Vietnam.
So there's a couple of pages here that are very interesting.
I read this. Castro-Cuban counteraction. The military reaction will be determined in large measure by the will of the Cuban armed forces to resist, which would be fierce as well as by the weapons available to them and their proficiency in their use at the time of the U.S. military intervention. The military capabilities of Cuba are oriented primarily toward defensive activities, meaning they're not offensive. They're not trying to attack us.
It's an island with a lot of water around it.
Right. But Cuban plans are believed to contemplate a strong initial resistance followed by a determined defense of pre-selected key points and finally by protracted guerrilla warfare. That's a very reasonable synopsis.
Oh, yeah.
Cuba has about 50 MiG fighters, some of which may be...
I'm sorry, Jim. Also, specifically the mountains, Cuba has really... Just like Castro did. Yeah.
That's right. That's how he came to power, for crying out loud, right?
Tierra Maestra.
Yeah. Cuba has about 50 MiG fighters, some of which may be configured for carrying light bombs. Any of these that survive U.S. airstrikes could be used offensively against targets in Florida. Mm-hmm. Also, they have 11 B-26 aircraft, some of which, if they survive the airstrikes by U.S. forces, could attempt to attack targets in the southeastern United States. All forces engaged in the operation, as well as the Continental Air Defense Forces, however, would be alert to guard against any such attempts at retaliation. Possibility of a requirement for a
No, it's right there, D. You missed D, in the future.
Oh, yeah. In the future of the Castro-Cuban capability for counteraction will improve if Soviets continue to provide the Cubans, that shouldn't be possessive, the Cubans with additional military equipment and training. Thus, the urgency of the requirement to remove the communist government from Cuba is made apparent by Castro's constantly increasing capabilities. That's an exaggeration there. That's a political paragraph. 6, possibility of a requirement for a sustained operation. The duration of a U.S. military presence in Cuba is contingent upon such factors as the will of Castro-Cuban forces to resist invasion, the degree of popular support a defeated Castro might receive from the conduct of residual guerrilla operations, and time required to reconstitute an effectively friendly Cuban government. It would never happen. There would never be a friendly Cuban government. I mean, that's just ludicrous.
Well, the friendly Cuban government was all in exile, Jim. That's what all of these guys were jockeying for permission to be the ones
the Iraqis and all these other, groups.
You had Manuel Artiman, Manuel Rai,
that were played. This is to play.
You had Priel Socarrás. You had, even Batista, probably, for God's sake, probably say, hey, U.S., go ahead, we'll do it again.
Following the establishment of essential military control of the island, a substantial U.S. military commitment may be required in Cuba for a significant period of time, like 20, 30, 50 years. I mean, this is idiotic.
Mm-hmm.
Post-assault tasks will include restoration of law and order and the conduct of counter-guerrilla. I mean, we're still in Korea, for crying out loud.
Mm-hmm.
We're still in Korea.
And
to achieve the objectives of some paragraph B above, it's planned that the post-assault military presence initially will consist of substantial Army follow-on forces with such other sea and air support as may be required. This will be reduced gradually in size as the effectiveness of the new Cuban government increases thereafter. A lengthy period of providing military assistance is anticipated. Yeah, a lengthy period, right? There's a euphemism for you.
That's right.
Decades.
That's right.
Discussion. What happened? In the context of history, must consider the timing of this memorandum. The October missile crisis of 1962 put the superpowers on the brink of thermonuclear war over Cuba. This memorandum is dated 2 August 1962. It appears that the intelligence apparatus that detected the missile buildup also forced the plan to be scratched. It might have also sealed JFK's fate. Well done, Larry. Well done.
I think so. I think it sealed JFK's fate because once, this overwhelming, invasion of Cuba, gets
but you're really only talking about convincing the military, but they didn't take much convincing. Remember, Lyndon forced himself on the ticket in L.A. in 60 in order to accede to the presidency when Jack was taken out. Bobby Baker predicting in public he wouldn't live out his first term and he'd die a violent death. Lyndon was going to take care of business. We're just talking here about, military enthusiasm for the project or not.
Mm-hmm. But the redactions speak volumes. You know, it's just unbelievable.
Well, that's just, yeah, that was just.
This is something that is comparable to a D-Day.
Yeah.
Which actually, I actually had, let's see, I had, oh, okay.
Now, if Richard Nixon would have been in office, they would have launched it. It would have happened. There's no doubt about it.
Let me go back to screen share and show you guys what D-Day actually looked like.
Oh, yeah, you had some comparisons.
Yeah, here you go. Okay, deployed for, this is Normandy, okay? Personnel on board Allied ships, 287,000. This top one is number of soldiers deployed in England, okay, on D-Day. But the ones that were mobilized were, look, it's very similar right here. Mm-hmm. Allied soldiers, you know, that landed, you know, and sailors and British soldiers. I mean,
that's very interesting, Larry.
Landing forces and helicopters.
Look at the deployed equipment. It's almost, you know, a carbon copy, you know.
Well, you wonder if they took that as their lead.
Oh, absolutely. It's very, very possible, you know. The tonnage, you know, the vehicles, you know, the aircraft, you know, the transport.
But the Germans had a massive fighting force in the Cuban.
Oh yeah. Of course, they had you know, years to build the, you know, their resistance there, you know, and those bunkers and all those walls and what do you call those? Where they had everything ready, you know.
Batteries, like they call them.
Yeah, to repel the invasion. You know, I hear. I mean, I've seen documentaries that just went all up and down the coast of France. You know, for miles and miles and miles, hundreds of miles. You know, so yeah. Anyway, this is just to give you a comparison here of what this Cuba idea was all about. I think it was kind of crazy. And for them to release the document is just, you know, another drop in the bucket, you know. I
love it, Larry. Okay. This has already been a fascinating show. I mean, even if we don't go for a full hour, I really love what we've done already.
Yeah, well, I'll give you guys a little sneak peek on something else.
Go for it.
Because this is what here's. Because we've talked about this guy before, Warren de Bruys.
Yeah.
He keeps coming, and I mean, he just keeps like the what's the bunny that keeps going and going?
Energizer bunny.
Energizer bunny. That's Warren de Bruys, you know. And this time we have a new document that pops out, and it talks about Lee Oswald being monitored in both New Orleans and in Dallas, okay, because of the Fair Play Committee, Fair Play for Cuba Committee. And this is 10/25, okay, and the time period 8/9/63, which was the same day that Lee got involved, you know, with Bringuier and company there down there on Canal Street, okay, the fracas. And what this one gives us is actual information on the informants. And right here, one copy of this report is being furnished to the Dallas Division. The Dallas Division, inasmuch as that office is presently conducting inquiries to locate Lee Oswald, subject of a separate investigation. Okay, I found that to be very, very interesting.
Yeah.
I remember so and so. And if Oswald has relocated in the Dallas territory, it is possible he may inaugurate a Fair Play for Cuba branch in that area. One copy is being furnished to the INS.
Setting them up. Wow, this is a little more explicit than you'd expect.
Yeah, but check this out. Okay, you see this. These are the first 2 pages of this report, Jim. Okay, now the report stands out not because of what I just talked about, the ongoing surveillance of Lee and tracking him, you know, in the cities of New Orleans and Dallas, but because of what it does not mention. Okay, now look at how long this report originally was.
Yeah.
40 pages.
And it's cut down to how many here?
Two.
Wow.
Now, in those 40
Wow.
pages, we've got complete information on all of these informants. Okay? Orlando Piedra was not just any informant. Okay? And for those who don't know who this guy was the head of the investigative bureau, sort of like the FBI in Cuba under Batista. Okay, and what's he doing? Informing on Lee Oswald regarding the Fair Play for Cuba Committee, and then forget about these other two but this guy Jessie Cora, look who he was. Public relations,
International trademark. Wow.
components. You know who he worked for?
Play show.
Of course.
All
Okay.
CIA.
So I mean, we're gonna have to go. But so like I put this in, for a little humor, as that old Wendys commercial used to say. Remember, where's the beef?
Yeah.
Well,
Sorry.
can you guys see this?
Oh,
Yeah.
sure. Love it.
Big fluffy bun. It's a very big fluffy.
Some other places give you a lot less beef.
The huge bun.
At Wendy's.
Where's the beef?
Boy, that one goes back.
That does. Antique commercial. Fun.
Yeah. Everybody remembers that. I mean, those of us who remember that commercial are actually, revealing our age. But
Yes.
Let me see if I can get out of this here. I don't want this play.
I was a 24-year-old whippersnapper when that commercial was out.
So anyway, can you guys see this here?
Yeah. Warren DeVries.
So anyway, what happened to the 38 pages that are missing?
Yes.
Yeah, right. And this is one of the Bruys. This is from Joe Mellon's site, and both of them actually spoke to the Bruys, and they report, the results in the book. And obviously, Du Bois never admitted to having known Lee Oswald. Remember when we did the Orestes Peña show where the HSCA document where he talked about Du Bois and Oswald and the custom agents, and Oswald being chummy and hanging around with all these guys, and how Du Bois, told him that he was going to get rid of his ass, and how Peña kept insisting, and he went to the Warren Commission. And he told him what he knew about Lee Oswald and this Wesley Liebler stomping out any time that Peña was about to talk about Du Bois and Oswald. And then let's not forget that Peña actually said, and he knew for a fact, that when Lee went to Dallas, Du Bois went to Dallas with Lee before the assassination.
Yeah, that's stunning.
Before the assassination, that Du Bois was Lee's handler, no doubt about that. Okay, and Harold Weisberg was onto all this information because he knew Peña for a long time, and he actually drew a lot of the information from Peña to write his book Oswald in New Orleans. And here's a very interesting part here, because Weisberg was brought before the New Orleans Parish Grand Jury, and that was courtesy of Jim Garrison, okay? And this is what Weisberg had to say that day, and he talked about how Peña kept saying at several points, there's something I must tell you about the FBI in New Orleans, I must tell you about Du Bois, but before I must tell you about the FBI in New Orleans, how they were handling Lee Oswald, how they were manipulating this Fair Play for Cuba committee, and how even Du Bois went one time into Bringier's place of business, and he told him that he could infiltrate his organization, the DRE, anytime he wanted. So that's why when Lee went over there with his pamphlet, his Marine pamphlet to show him, the first thing that Bringier thought, hey, this guy's, he's been sent by the FBI, he's an agent, it's only later on that Bringier said, oh, no, he's a Castro, he's a commie and everything, But at first, Bringier knew that it was a plant, that it was he was being manipulated by Du Bois, as a provocateur, as an agent, and that's why Lee was playing this very dangerous game, you know. And so Pena, this is what's this Wesley Liebler, you know, he manipulates Pena's testimony in the Warren Commission to make sure that he does not connect Lee and Du Bois together, which then, you know, we know for a fact that it really happened. And then, so for example here, Warren Du Bois, from the time of his first attendance, he used to go to Cuban organization meetings, and he had Pena as an informer, okay? And all this is stuff that Weisberg is telling the grand jury, you know. And let's see. And obviously, you know, when Garrison subpoenas not only Du Bois, but also Regis Kennedy, you know, and Regis Kennedy did, but he invoked executive privilege every time that they tried to ask him anything relevant. You know, there was a point where he did admit that they were looking for a Clay Bertrand, you know, and that was the only thing that they were able to get out of him at the Clay Shaw trial. But Du Bois never showed up. In fact, Du Bois ends up in, of all places, in Puerto Rico. Okay, Du Bois was fully bilingual. He translated documents. He knew about 3 or 4 different languages, completely 100% fluent in Spanish. They made him disappear to South America. And then in 1974, he ends up in Puerto Rico, of all places. And actually, Bernard Fensterwald and Michael Ewing wrote this book, which I have a copy of. And they wrote, Warren Du Bois currently serves as a special agent in charge of the highly coveted FBI office in Puerto Rico. Of course, it's highly coveted because it's sandy beaches, you know, nice weather, you know. You have to
like
deal
a resort. It's like having to guard a resort.
Yeah, yeah. But at the time, Puerto Rico had a problem with the, and still does, you know, not to the extent that it did at the time, the activists for independence.
Right.
And the nationalists, you know, which the nationalist movement of the 50s.
Is this a Weisberg? No, this is Greg Roberts, huh?
Yeah, this is Greg Roberts. This is a letter. This guy tracks him down in Puerto Rico. I mean, this is when I read this letter, I just laughed, you know, because he wrote Du Bois. He found him in Puerto Rico, okay? And he goes,
He's so candid. He's so honest. Yeah,
and he goes, I'm a freelance news writer, photographer since November 22nd, the critic of the official assertion that President John F. Kennedy was killed by one person. For some time, I've been interested in ascertaining your exact relationship with Lee Oswald.
Is not going to get anywhere near this guy.
Of course not. No, in fact, what he does, he writes a letter in response. You know, he was so stung. Yeah, with Du Bois. He's so stung by this letter that he says, wait a minute, blah, blah, blah. You know, this blatant bias is apparent in Robert's statement, you know. And he goes, and blatantly, he goes, perhaps I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong. Perhaps Oswald reported to the Dallas Red Squad agent Hosty as well as to you. Okay, among those telling lies. He has a
pretty good grip on it already.
Oh yeah, among those telling lies on the program. This was a CBS program.
David Bellum, William Colby, David Phillips, and probably you.
Yeah,
he got it. He's nailing it.
He's telling him. I read about you in the Kennedy Conspiracy, Oswald, New Orleans, and a couple of other books. In the Robert Kennedy, we find the same thing. The same agencies lying to the public.
This guy's good. This guy's very good.
Yeah, yeah. So this guy, Du Bois, was so shaken up that he said, hey, I got to respond to this on 12/8/75. You know, he writes to the director at the time, you know, and he said, wait a minute, man, I have to respond to this. And obviously he's citing Pena's, since it was Orestes Pena who was talking about him going with Oswald to Dallas. And that story was also picked up by Mark Lane, by the way. And in this program, you know, he's so stung by this that he wants to set the record straight. And guess what he cites? He cites Pena's Warren Commission testimony, which was cooked up by Wesley Liebler. So, you know, it's a lawyer, you know, doing what lawyers do.
You fabricate evidence and then you cite it as though it were authentic.
Yeah, yeah. So, but I go a little bit further into this Du Bois thing, because this is very interesting. Now, when Du Bois was in Puerto Rico, there was a lot of militancy, regarding the independence movement and young kids, getting involved, And there was a story, there was an incident here, and it was called Cerro Maravilla. And there was an execution of 2 young pro-independence activists. And this just happened to happen just a year after Du Bois left the island on 25 July. Okay, now the organization, Third World Traveler, described the events in this manner, okay? Clear instance of direct FBI involvement in anti-independentista violence is the Cerro Maravilla episode of July 25, 1978. Okay, now 2 young activists, Hernando Darío Rosado and Carlos Soto Arribí, accompanied a provocateur named Alejandro González Malavé, who lured them into a trap, and they were shot to death by police near the mountain village. Official reports claim the pair had been on their way to blow up a television tower. They never had any explosives on them, Jim. What they had was a little bit of charcoal. I think they were going to cook something or something up there. But what happened is, to make a long story short, these 2 kids were slaughtered up there, and they had hijacked a cab, a Taca Público driver. And the Público driver, after everything was said and done, he said, at first, the governor of Puerto Rico said the policemen, were heroes because they had stopped this terrorist attack and blah, blah, blah. And that there was 1 volley of shots, when later on it was proven that the taxi driver said, no, there were 2 volleys of shots. The kids were alive when they were first arrested, and the police just executed them up there after they beat the crap out of them, So this guy, Julio Cesar Andrades, he came forward and he said that this had been planned from all the way high up in collaboration with the Bureau, okay? Now, this led to the confirmation that González Malavé's role as an infiltrator, reporting to both the local police and the FBI, a situation which prompted him to admit having planned and urged the bombing in order to set the 2 young victims up for execution. In the end, it was shown that Darío and Soto had surrendered. Police forced the men on their knees, handcuffed them behind their backs, and the 2 independentistas pleaded for justice. Police tortured them and murdered them, okay? Now, as an agent, provocateur, infiltrator, undercover operative answering to the FBI, inciting 2 young lads to carry out a harebrained scheme guaranteed to fail in order to influence public opinion. Does this sound familiar? Did Du Bois leave this mechanism in place before he left this coveted FBI SAC position in Puerto Rico? If he did, his handling of Lee Oswald in New Orleans and Dallas would have put him at the top of the list of those qualified to do so. So now, this we'll cover the rest of this next week.
Yeah, this deserves a whole show. Yeah, good stuff.
New documents coming out on Du Bois, and who these guys, the informants. And before we go, I just have to tell you who this Jessie Cora was, and I'm not done discussing there's,
But you're just doing a great job with all of this. I'm just so impressed. It's wonderful. Check
this one out. Jessie Cora worked for Clay Shaw at the International Trade Mart as Director of Public Relations, right? Now, Joe Mellon, she minces no words in her book, and she said this guy was CIA. Now, right after the Bay of Pigs, 17 April 1961, and this is what a lot of people have this misconception that JFK fired Cabell, Bissell, and Dulles right after the Bay of Pigs. That's not so. Okay. Right.
Dulles was retired with fanfare, but Bissell and Cabell were fired.
In November, that's right. And Cabell didn't leave the CIA until probably a year later. So in the interim, right after the Bay of Pigs, which was 17 April, CIA Deputy Director General Charles Campbell was hosted at a grand event in New Orleans by, of all people, Clay Shaw and Jessie Cora.
Wow.
Now, it has already been proven that Shaw was a CIA asset, but this event really blew my mind, Jim. The Cabell affair was quite the soiree, where Clay Shaw himself made the Cabell introduction. Here is the press release by Jessie Cora, which goes into detail about the Cabell family military lineage and even mentions his brother, mayor of Dallas at the time, Earl Cabell. who we reported 2 years ago had been a CIA asset himself.
Joined the agency in 1956.
Yeah, now look at this press release. Foreign Policy Association, deputy, and look who puts it out. Okay, Clay Shaw, program chairman, Jessie Cora, press relations chairman. You know,
Boy, just Jim Garrison was all over it, man.
I wish Jim would have had this document. I wish, I mean, this would have been just, this would have clinched the whole deal, you know. And this just came out in the new documents, by the way. Deputy Director Charles Campbell of the CIA, a veteran war pilot, full generation in the U.S. Air Force, will address New Orleans Foreign Policy Association May the 9th at 8:30 p.m. in the Grand Ballroom of the Sheraton Charles Hotel. C.C. Walter, president of the Foreign Affairs Group, announced today. General Campbell will be communist, subject
Communist
communist
Communist science.
Communist science?
Yeah,
Oh,
leadership meeting will precede the CIA second in command talks. Scheduled at 8 p.m. Half an hour business session will be concerned with election of officers. Blah blah blah. Clay Shaw, program chairman, will introduce Campbell.
Campbell, born in Dallas, Texas.
Born in Dallas.
Campbell was born in 1906 or 1905, not in 2000. That should have been 1905. That's a typo.
Could
Not
be.
1920.
Probably, yeah. He wasn't a spring chicken at the time of JFK. But Campbell is a member of a distinguished Southern family whose name, and they actually go through the entire family lineage. Campbell's brother's grandfather, Brigadier General William Tiger Campbell, was mayor of Dallas around the turn of the century. Like, I mean, when JFK was in Parkland and Earl Campbell was insisting on getting a justice of the peace in there immediately to sign the papers off and get JFK's body the hell out of Dallas, this is who was in control, Earl Campbell, you know? And so, you know, when he goes to Dallas, you know, these people were the ones in control of everything there, you know? So,
Yeah, it's our backyard.
Yeah. So,
and had been for 60 years, at least the turn of the century or more.
But dig this. Local historians also note the fact that General W.L. Campbell, sometimes Confederate cavalry commander in Arkansas, Confederate, with General P.G.T. Beauregard, a supervisor of the Louisiana State Lottery. Campbell served from 1893 to 1907. I mean, commissioned. I mean, oh, okay, yeah, you're right. See, that's when he was commissioned, 1925. General Charles served for 5 years in the 12th Field Artillery at Fort Sam Houston. He applied for pilot training, won his wings in 1931, becoming flight. Oh, I mean, this is a complete background, you know, and there's a lot more. There's only 3 pages that are legible, you know, but this Jessie.
That was a perfect, no, go back, Larry. That paragraph was the perfect place to conclude this evening. It appears that Jessie Cora was part of the ship dipping of Lee Oswald. The evidence clearly suggests he had an ongoing relationship with Dubray's, plus allegedly he was present at the Trade Mart on Canal Street when Lee was distributing Fair Play for Cuba leaflets. He even provided one for the FBI. I love it, Larry.
Saying, you know,
I love it.
You know, I'm
Talk about lacing these things together.
Yeah, and then you go back here and you look at the informants that are supposed to give you, you know, the truth, gospel here. You know, Orlando Piedra. Wait till we cover him. You know, you're gonna puke. You know,
this has been fantastic.
Yeah.
You know, and
Gary, you want to take us out?
Take us out. We're going overtime.
And then this guy, Postal Inspector Lou Robertson, New Orleans, he was CIA.
All right, we'll return to these subjects.
Yeah, we're swarming in it. All right, fellas. Another great show, another day, another great show. Larry Rivera.